Hello and welcome back to KT Technic, my second channel where we deal with everything technical, including the smart car, which we're back on again today. Now, one of the things that people complain about with smart cars, and very few succeed in fixing, is the roof, the panoramic roof we see here. And on the 451, it's polycarbonate. I think on the earlier ones it was glass, which wasn't too much of a problem. But for, I think, safety reasons and maybe lightness, they changed to polycarbonate. Now, on the original, when it was manufactured, it had an ultraviolet clear coating, which was put over the whole of the roof, and it protected it from ultraviolet radiation and deterioration of the polycarbonate. Unfortunately, during the, well, in this case, 14 years of its life, the actual coating started to deteriorate, mostly when it's been left, ironically, out in the sun. And this manifests itself with checkering, cracking, and also delaminating. So you see the actual top coat coming off, peeling off in big swathes of polycarbonate and no coating, and it looks really horrible. Now, I searched the internet for what do you do about that. There are trains of thoughts. The best thing to do is to wrap it so that you lose the panoramic roof. I didn't want to do that because actually one of the major benefits of this car is you feel like you're in a sports car when you've got the panoramic roof open on the inside, and you've got the sun shining down on you, but you're not in an open. So if it's windy or whatever, you're actually getting the benefits of an open top car without all the wind noise and etc. etc. So the second is to try to polish out the individual areas, and that doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because you're polishing into an edge. You're always polishing into what's left of the original clear coat. So the third type, which I've only ever seen done successfully once, is to remove the entire top coat, the ultraviolet clear coat, and start again, polishing it down to a really high gloss finish. And that was done, I think, by one chap on the internet, and I've followed his advice. Now, what he did, he used a one of these random orbital sanders, and so I decided to get one. I didn't buy the cheapy Chinese ones, but I bought quite an expensive. I think this is about 70 quid. So it's quite large. It takes, I see they're 150 mil discs, and that's the important part, the discs. It's quite frightening when you first start out, and if I hadn't watched him do it, I don't think I'd have started this way. But you've got to start with a really coarse grit. Sorry, I've been just covering myself in dust. And this is 240 grit, and it's quite an open pore, so it doesn't contaminate, it doesn't block up while you're doing it. I bought a pack of those, and these are mica, so you don't want to get cheap ones, but mica are pretty good. It doesn't really matter what you use from there up to about 3000 grit, because you're going to get swirls in it. You're going to get random orbital circles throughout the whole surface. What this is for, this first grit, is to take off completely that clear coat right down to the surface of the polycarbonate. So that's the workhorse. That's the one you spend most of your time on at the beginning. And then, as with anything polishing, so polishing mirrors, polishing gemstones, which I'm quite familiar with from my astrophotography days, you go up the grits. And so you're starting in 240, so you go 320, 400, 600, 800, 1200, 3000, and go up the grits. And as you do, you've got to cover the area. It gets easier and easier because you're taking out the preceding swirls, the coarseness of the swirls of the grit that precedes it. That's a very important thing, because when you get to the polishing stage, you will never ever get any swirls out you've missed. So it's vital that as you go up the grits, you finish it off, and then you go to the next grit, and you do that until you see the same grit swirls, but a little finer, a little finer and a little finer. You don't see any of the coarse swirls. So that's very important as you're going up the grit. But as you're going up the grit, it gets easier and easier, as I say. It doesn't really matter what the quality is. You're going to be using quite a few of these, so it could become quite expensive. But when you get to around about 3,000 grit, you need to start using a high quality discs. Now these are made by Kovacs, Kovax. I'll put a link in the description, and these go all the way up, I think, to the higher thousands. They're all different colors, and you start with those, and what these don't do is they don't produce random orbital swirls. So what you're doing now is you're refining it as you're going up. And the idea is to finish on around about 3,000 grit. You can go higher, I think, on some of these. And then when you've got that, you should get a beautiful finish that's absolutely matte, kind of a matte satin finish over the whole of the surface of the roof. There will be quite a lot of dust created, and you need to keep removing that because that dust will contaminate succeeding grits. So to remove the dust, I just simply use for the duster, and just you can see I've just started already. We'll go into this later on with some close-up shots, but this gets all that dust out that you've created. And then what we use is a cloth with some isopropyl alcohol on it, so you'll wipe the surface off, and that will give you an opportunity to see the swirls that are left in the surface before you go on to the next grit. Have you left any clear coat on it? Have you left any big swirls on it, and so on? So that's the last stage before you move on through the grits. When we've done all that, we then go on to polishing compounds. They start at number 1, which is a coarse compound. And again, you can use a pad. With this Random Orbital Sander, I've got a pad for using various pads and compounds and mops that go onto it, which allow me to polish it to a very high gloss. Now, at that point, I don't know what's the best thing to do. I need to do some research on that, because I think that ultimately is to tape everything off, mask everything off, and put an ultraviolet acrylic clear coat back on the roof to protect the polycarbonate you've just polished. I think that will be the way to go. I'm not sure, the jury's out on that at the moment. But if we just pause for a second, and I'll show you where I'm on top of the roof here, and I'll show you exactly how we do this sanding. And we're back on the roof. You can see I've started in this corner. Now, this is very, very rough, and it's got quite a lot of swirls on it. You have to use a mask. You don't want to be getting breathing in. So excuse me while I disappear behind here, and I'll show you. This is quite a good Random Orbital Sander. You hold the button, and I go up relatively medium high. And you've got to be very careful when you start. Don't dig in. So you're not leaning forward like that, because that will create a trough and you'll never get it out. So you're trying to be as gentle as possible. Don't need to put any pressure on it, it'll do itself. But you will need to clear. All we're doing at the moment is getting rid of the clear coat. Now you'll know when the clear coat's gone, because as you can hear here, you can hear a s, whereas up here you can't. So we haven't cut through the clear coat yet. Don't forget to tape up the edges of the tritium cell so that you don't accidentally damage those passing by. So this is 240 grit Mirka dry sandpaper on a Random Orbital Sander. And you do this until you're over the whole surface. So what we've done is we've taken the Kovacs, which is the very high, very expensive as well, very high quality paper, which is this paper here on the machine, and with the Random Orbital Sander, with this is 240 grit, and there's no major scratches anymore. This side, I've got to do the other side. You can see the difference between a 240 cheap paper and a quality paper. So this is now got tiny little random orbital marks in it, but they will come out in the successive grits. But we're getting there. What we've got to create is this matte finish with no major scratches. There's a couple down here that need sorting out, but generally speaking, this is almost done up to 240. Once we get past the 240 using Kovacs papers, there won't be any further deep scratches because the paper is so good quality. It's the importance of using quality paper. It is expensive, but it's worth every single penny in labour terms. And we're back at a stage where, before I go into stage 3, I just want to summarize what I've learned from stages 1 and 2. Now, I'm learning as much as you are about how to finish this roof. I don't see any successful examples of anybody doing it this way. I see people wrapping. I see people just leaving it as it is. But I've gone through and done it following one guy's theory, and I've learned a few things that were mistakes in my viewpoint. I've not used wet and dry. I have used wet and dry. It didn't work very well, not on polycarbonate. I don't know why. It just seemed to be a problem. So I've started at originally 80 grit, horrendously worrying. I used Mirka, our Brunet 80 grit discs up to 320 disc, and when you first, my friends sort of came up to me and said, "Oh my God!" And when you first do it, it looks like an absolute mess. It's scratched to high heaven. But what you're attempting to do at this point only is to take off the clear coat. You've got to get the clear coat off. I left a bit in one corner over there. Didn't realize it until a later grit. And then when I'm going to get higher and higher through the grits, it was very evident that the clear coat was still there, so I had to go back into that corner and blend it in. So make sure you cover the whole thing with 80 grit. That's taking off the clear coat. Go up to 120 grit, then 240 grit, and then 320 grit. Once you got to 320 grit, you should have taken all the clear coat off and be left with a scratched but fairly smooth surface, at which point you move to the Kovacs discs. Now, I think these are almost vital. They're not nice to have. They're vital. They are superb. They don't create any scratches. They take away all the previous scratches, and they are the single most important thing in this entire process. So yes, they're expensive, but then again, you know, how much is a new roof if you can get one and have it fitted? So I think they're worth it. I got bags of 5 of different grits. Now I got 320, 240, 400, 500, 800, and I've got to get, I'm just going to see what 800 produces. This is 800, so I'm virtually ready for the last part of phase 2. So the first part is getting the clear coat off. Second part is refining it with these, and you're going over in a very even pattern, the same as you would if you were doing a car primer. You're just smoothing it off until you get to a higher grit, and you're just looking after every single grit. You take isopropyl alcohol, any grade, doesn't matter. You've got soak one rag in it, clean it, get most of the dust off, and all the previous grit. Very important. And once you've got all of that off, you then polish it with another cloth, and you just check over the whole surface looking for previous scratches. What you should end up with when you get to about 500, 600, 800 grit is a matte finish, very smooth. Get in the car, look up, and it looks like frosted glass. You can see through it. So we're now starting to see through it, and it's frosted glass from the end of the Kovacs orbital sander. After this, stage 3, I'm coming on to next, will be using various grades of polish and compound, using the orbital sander, but using pads and mops. I've got a lamb's wool mop as a final mop, and that should bring it up to absolute clarity, I'm hoping. So I'll come back to you after this stage, and we'll have a look at see what the final results are. See you again later. So we got halfway across the roof with the polish, and I think what I'll do is I'll wait for the 6,000 grit to arrive. There is still a haze left by the 3,000 grit, so I want to go up the grits a little bit more before I start cutting. Okay, so we got up to 3,000 grit, and what I'm doing now is just going around the very peripheral, and if it can be seen here, it's a little bit duller around here, and all the way along the edge there where you're unable to get to with a 6-inch polisher without fear of damaging the edge here. So what I'm doing is I'm using micro mesh, which is a thing I've used before on wood, but it's by G Abrasives, and you get everything from 1500 mesh, it's not grit, that's 1500 mesh, 1800 all the way up to 12,000 mesh, and that equates to very fine. So what I'm doing is I'm using the coarser, which are very fine actually, but they're coarse, just to get any tiny scratches out along the periphery of the roof, and I'll go up the grits until I get to 12,000, and that will be probably better polished than the rest of the roof. It's a bit of a chore to do the whole roof like that, otherwise that would be perfect, but I think that's an option. You know, micro mesh discs, they sell at 6-inch for the Random Orbital Sander, but I'm not sure I want to go to that expense anymore. I'm just going to try polishing beyond 6,000, 8,000 grit on the 3M Trizac papers. Let me see what happens there, and later on in this video you'll be able to see the results, but it's looking good anyway. I mean, crikey, it's looking 1,000 times better than it was. As you can see, the reflection is pretty darn good. When we left the last section, I showed the surface, and I said that it was nearly perfect, but it wasn't absolutely perfect, absolutely crystal clear, which is how I wanted it. And the reason was there was still some residual loops and Random Orbital Sander marks in the 3,000 grit Trizac 3M by 3M. So what I did was I went away and ordered 2 more discs. This one is a 6,000 grit, and I've also got an 8,000. It absolutely feels smooth. It feels like leather, but it is creating a tiny micro swirls in it, but it is misting it up, which will mean that when I go to use the cutting compounds, and I have a few here, the one that I'm going to go for, I've got some more of these coming, is Sonax, made in Germany. This one, I saw it recommended highly on a YouTube video, and so this one is the very fine one, but also I've got some Menzerna, which must be made in Italy, surely. I don't know. and let's have a look. Anyway, it's not made in China, that's for sure. So I've got this one also recommended to me. Oh no, this is also made in Germany, so that's brilliant. So there's three of these coming, two of these coming to augment this one. This one you take is equivalent to about 1,000 grit. So once I've done this up to with the orbital sander, I will start off with this one, and then I think the next one is 2,500 grit, and then there's a very, very fine one. And I've also got some something sent to me by my dear friend in Germany, sheaf paste, which is a very high luster one, again by Sonax. So I'm going for the higher stuff. I did start out watching quite a few American videos, so all the Maguire stuff. I do find this a bit tacky. I wasn't really happy with it, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. This one is for Ultimate Compound Color and Clarity Restorer. So I think it's probably great for old paints like red, you know, bringing them back bright red again, but not necessarily for polycarbonate. I did actually go and get one of their, see, I'm trying all these different things so you can benefit. You don't have to go and buy all these things. I'll tell you which is the best and you can choose. But this one is by Maguire and it's Plastex. Again, this is pretty efficient. It is meant for plastics. So it's meant for polishing up plastics and restoring them. So I'm going to go and try that in a small area. But generally speaking, I mean, you know, to be honest with you right now, this is looking the dog's nuts. And so I'm really happy with it. It just needs to be absolutely perfect, because I've proven to myself, and obviously then therefore to you, that the process of aggressive removal of the clear coat, followed by removal of the aggressive scratches of the aggressive removal of the clear coat, followed by using random orbital sanders up, and you end up with those hoop loops all over it. And the idea is to make the hoop loops smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as they go up, without leaving any more left. And then once you get to the cutting compound stage with the coarse or heavy duty cutting compound, you can basically eliminate all those loops, because they will disappear by using a pad on the same machine. I will be putting a complete shopping list of what I find, because there have been things that I've used during this video that I found better things to use. So, and also potentially cheaper, but just as good things. So I mentioned, for instance, the Kovacs discs. They are very expensive. I mean, seriously, very expensive. They are renowned for being perfect. They work beautifully. But this 3M Trizac stuff, I was recommended by a gentleman that came on the post that I did recently, the sneak preview posts. And he said, you know, Trizac, good stuff. So I bought the 1,500, 3,000, 6,000, 8,000, and I agree, it is good stuff, and it's a lot cheaper. So, and it's not leaving any scratches. So at the moment, I'm creating a mist here. In fact, when I first started doing it, I couldn't even see what effect it was having, but it presumably is having an effect. And it's not until you get inside the car. I posted on one of the smart forums a picture looking up through from the driving seat, and that was at the last stage. That was the kind of pre refining stage, and where I'd cut it using the compound, you could see right through it, and there wasn't any scratches at all. But on the side that I hadn't done yet, it was kind of looking through a toilet window, you know, a bathroom window. And so all of this project to go and do this has been new to me, as it is to you, and it kind of encompasses all of the things that I've learned from various hundreds, actually, of videos of finishing plastics, finishing the smart car roof, all the woes and troubles that people have had with their polycarbonate roofs on the smart cars. And the whole idea, and I've got a queue of people waiting to see this video, the whole idea is to clarify what is the best way to go about it. First of all, to prove that it works, which it does 100%. if you buy everything from scratch, it's not that cheap. But later on, when I finish the conclusion summary of this video, I will go through the costs, and I'll put that in the notes. But if you go and buy yourself an orbital sander, I've never been dissatisfied with this one, even though I've dropped it, would you believe, from this height onto the ground, broken the battery, had to glue it back together again. It still works perfectly. So highly recommended. Doesn't seem to throw a wobbly or anything. Oh, hang on a minute. It does throw a wobbly. That's how it works. Okay. Doesn't seem to break down at any point. So, yeah. So I'll get on and finish this, and I'll come back to you. My time tomorrow, your time now. And so we reached the end of this video of the restoration of the Smart 451 polycarbonate roof. I've learned a lot during this journey, and there's some things that I wouldn't do again, and I'm going to explain those, and also things that worked. So what are we doing here? We're restoring the roof. I wanted it as close to factory finish as possible. As you can see, it's got a nice sheen to it as we speak at the moment. It's got, actually looks better in the sunlight, which has gone in, and it's now got a film of water over the top of it. But generally speaking, it's absolutely almost as factory condition. Now, there are some chips in it which must have come from rocks hitting it on the motorway, or from the sky, or birds dropping things on it. So inevitably it's not going to be perfect, but it's absolutely 1,000 times better than it was. What causes the problem, what causes the patches on these polycarbonate roofs, is the clear coat they put on to protect them from ultraviolet light. And over the decade plus, this has deteriorated itself. It's sacrificed itself, as it were. Some are very badly, and the polycarbonate has gone completely, and I think you need to just replace them as you would a windscreen. But if it has gone and it's just patchy, there is a solid substrate underneath the polycarbonate, and that's where we need to get to. So the key to this, there is no shortcut, is to get rid of the clear coat first of all. So you've got to tape up all around the edges of the roof to protect the edges from the coarser grits used on the Random Orbital Sander. And that brings me on to the best thing I bought. It cost me about nearly getting on for 80 quid. It's a Chinese one. It has 2 batteries, 21 volt, standard. I think they call them power share now. They fit quite a lot of Chinese tools coming out from AliExpress, Banggood, those sort of places, and on Amazon. I got it on Amazon because I wanted to try it out, see if it was any good, and if it wasn't, I could send it back. So that's a tip there. If you've got Amazon Prime, obviously you get delivery for free. So 75 quid. It has 6 speeds, and it has a Velcro hook pad on the front, and this fits any of the discs, sanding discs, and also polishing pads that you can get. And it's a 150 millimeter or 6-inch standard. So the batteries last pretty good. I think we probably do half a roof with a sander or a polisher before it runs out. And by that time, the other battery is charged up. So it comes with a charger and two batteries. I used this extensively, and I never got annoyed that I was waiting for any to charge up. So on the outset, the first thing you use is a relatively very coarse grit 6-inch mica. These are Abranet discs. They're hollow, they've penetrated holes in them. Some of them fit onto pads that have got vacuum cleaners on to stop dust, but it doesn't really matter. So these plop straight on. You've got to make sure that they're absolutely on the pad like that, because if you don't, the edge of the plastic will catch accidentally on your roof and you will have a big gouge. So make sure that sorry about that. I think the camera lady is getting inundated here. So I started at 120 grit. I think I could have probably started at 80 grit, but I didn't want to risk it because that would have caused some quite large gouge scratches. So I went for 120, and that worked out okay. I went all the way up the grits, and they go up to about I think it was 400 grit. Yeah, that was 400 grit, which is mica Abranet. There will be links in the comments. I was unlucky enough to find a second, well, not second hand, but new old stock supply of these, which are absolutely fabulous. They're called Kovacs Super Asilex, and they are used for doing this sort of job and paint, refinishing paint. They do not produce any swirl marks. I don't know how, I don't know why, but they don't. And they are brilliant, but they are super expensive. I managed to get some that a guy had for a job. He had them left over, and they would come as a job lot. But just for about a dozen of them, it was 60 quid. So these are quite expensive. And they start at 240. So they overlap that one, and they go all the way up to, I think I've got 800. Yeah, 800. And they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And they were the second key thing. First key thing, really good thing. And second one was these, followed on from the Mirka. So, and then I posted a few sneak previews during this making of this video, and some kind gentleman came on and said, oh, have you tried 3M discs? And these are Trizact discs, Trizact, and I hadn't, so I went and got some, and they're substantially cheaper than these Kovacs ones. But I needed ones that went above 800, which is all I could get on the Kovacs ones. So I went and got some of these. There's an 800, and they go up all the way to, oh, that's a 15, sorry. That's 8,000. Start again. They go 1,500, up to 8,000. So I went all the way up through, I think it goes 1,500, 3,000, 6,000, 8,000. So these are just examples of them. Once you get to the 8,000 grit on the 3M Trizacs, you really are polished anyway. There's no loops or anything. It's a kind of a matte polish, but it looks pretty good. But the key to it is it's consistent right across the surface, and there are no residual marks from the Random Orbital Sander, which causes these little commas that you see. And then I went and sponged on a set of pads. These are foam pads, and now you might ask, why have you got so many? And then there's lamb's wool buffing mops. Well, the reason why you got these is because you keep each one of them for a different grit. So when you're using cutting compounds, if you mix the grits on the pad, you will end up contaminating the previous grit. So you can't get finer and finer and finer, because you'll always have some left over from the previous cut. So I went through quite a lot of options for the cutting compounds that you need to do the final polishing, and they're all good. There wasn't a lot of difference in them, but one that literally shone out was these Zerna, which are made in Germany. They're about 15 quid a bottle, but you can get, I think, 4 of them for about 40. So all 4 of them. They start out at 400, 1,000, 2,500, and this is a final polish, 3-in-1 polish at the end. I'm not going to use this because this goes back a little bit in terms of cut. So I'm going to get to this stage, and then I'm going to do the final decision about how to protect the surface. I've used all 3 of these. Actually, I've used 2 of these. This one just came while I was filming this. And so I can get it even shinier than this after this video. I also bought a pack of microfiber. They don't have to be expensive ones. I think I bought 150 of them in a bag. The important thing for me was that they were different colors. So again, as with the foam pads, I can keep these to certain grits. So if you're using them to polish after you've used 1,000 grit, you use the red one, and I tried to match them to the colors. And then you've got these mops, which are a lamb's wool. I've used this one, and that brings up the buffs up the shine completely. So there you have it. It's happened. I've done it. It worked, and you can follow along, and I hope you do. I put the links in the comments to all the things I've used or recommend that I used in the down below. And but if you have any questions you want to ask me, just drop me a message in the comments and I'll get back to you. It's been a long drawn out process, but it's well worthwhile, because I think it does detract from the value of the car when you sell it, that you've got peeling any car that you see that's cosmetically not nice, and that's the only part of this car that wasn't nice. Then you end up losing money, quite a considerable amount of money on the deal. They can say, well, look at this, I've got to get this fixed. So it was more labor. You have to stop, wait and move on to the next stage quite often. Plus I'm not medically very well at the moment, so it was a bit of a stretch getting up and down steps, and I bought some plastic steps which were brilliant for just getting up and getting right across, reaching right across, because I'm a midget, to the surface of the entire roof. But it came out really nice. I like it. It's definitely worth doing, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll look out for the next one where another project will be on the Smart forthcoming. Take care and look after yourself. Oh, and don't forget, YouTube likes you to subscribe, and it likes you to stick your thumbs up and put comments in the comments. So I don't really care if the comments are nice, not nice, sarcastic, funny. I don't care, because activity on this video will bring views and it will bring revenue to the stream. So that's really important. Well, I hope to see you again in a few weeks' time. If I come out of the hospital okay, well, we'll soon see. Take care, look after yourself, goodbye.